Coach, when we talked to KP yesterday, he talked about the preseason being sort of the time for him to experiment with stuff, and of course he had the 5 fouls, so he was testing sort of the limits of what officials would call and what they wouldn't call. For a guy when they're moving to a new team, why is it important to maybe go through that?
Well, I think, figuring out how to play good defense and be physical without fouling, but still be aggressive. One of the things you can't do is foul shooters, and that's something that we've talked about, that we've done too much of. There's no experimentation on that one. I think the larger point is, our team being able to integrate, and I mentioned it to you, the urgency, but still the patience. So, I'd be the first one to be excited about this prospect of this team, but at the same time, bold predictions. There's been a lot of predictions in the last couple of years that haven't worked out so well. So I think, we need to be careful about listening to a lot of external noise, and make sure the way that we're going to have to be a good team is kind of, as I've said before, do what we always do, which is, focus on us, and focusing on us. Some of that is focusing on KP, and the fact that this all circles back.
I was going to say.
Yeah, and he's a player that we're excited about, but at the same time, he's still figuring out how to play with Jalen. He's still figuring out how to play with Zach. Dyson's figuring out how to play with Kristaps. So there's all those things going on at once, and we just keep working.
At this stage of the preseason, do you actually try to figure out rotations and things like that, or is it just more about getting guys in shape, make sure they make it healthy through the preseason?
Yeah,
How do you balance that?
I think it's really both. And, the other night against Houston, we played with a certain rotation in the first half. We'll continue to evaluate, and it's less about like experimentation than it is about kind of learning about one another. Everybody, players themselves, coaching staff, players, and as you mentioned, not just being healthy, but being sharp, and being in shape. Those are things that are really important. That if you're not, in shape, you see those things show up, and then the evaluation becomes more difficult, less accurate.
You talk to veterans like Kristaps or even Trae, and guys who've been in the league a few years, and kind of say, how many minutes you get for me tonight? Or you just kind of, or even the rookies or some of the young guys, like, we're going to give you a good 15, 20 minutes. Do you tell them that before the contest?
I think as a general rule, we try to communicate as much as possible. There are certain situations where it's easier than others. If a player isn't going to play, obviously, on a given night at all, they're not dressing, that becomes something that you talk about. I think sometimes you can't predict everything on the front end. So to have guys have an idea of what we're trying to do is important, because they're wondering. Last game against Houston, we didn't play some guys in the second half, and I think there's a crescendo to that. Again, balancing something like health. Kristaps had a really long summer. First of all, he's recovering from that respiratory infection. He did recover fully. Then he goes in and plays the Eurobasket, and that goes until late August, and then everybody's coming back, kind of excited, getting ready to work, and that's not the smartest thing for him after the way his summer went. Zach had something similar. But everybody's different in that regard. So trying to be mindful of all those things. And your original question when you talked about it, the cohesion, health, and conditioning. You're really trying to balance all those things game to game, and also with practice. You guys don't see that part as much, but we're conscious of it all the time. You need to be.
Yeah, speaking of practice, because we don't get to see it, have you...
Do you want to see practice?
Oh,
is that what you're saying?
No, we don't like to see practice. No, I want to see it. I want to see it. No, because,
Yeah.
guys like, not just Dyson, but Jalen, like, Can you
Is
tell?
that the Great Barrier Reef, by the way?
No, this is a.
Okay. Because I know you always try to bring Dyson into
I
the
know, I do
conversation
try
at some
to.
point. Go ahead.
Dash had a great game, by the way. He's been playing well. Just want to
Okay.
put that on your radar. No, but can you tell now? It's been.
I started it, right?
It's
All right,
been-
here we
it's
go.
been a couple of weeks. You've had a game. You've had a few practices. Can you see guys like, okay, I can see he's really worked on this part of his game or that part of his game, and how you can then incorporate that into game plans?
Yeah, I think that's a complicated process. You know, I mean, I think players can work on something, and you know, there's always, you know, variable lineups that you know, require different things from different players to make those lineups function. So, you know, the idea is to maximize what your guys are capable of doing, and that's, you know, you want guys to work on their games, and then there's portions of that that they're able to apply, and there's other portions they keep working on, you know, and gradually start to see, you know, those things show up in their play. Usually they show up in practice first, but that's kind of the process.
I know you had officials in here this week, and it seemed like maybe it came into play Monday, but how do you want your players to adapt to sort of the new high five point of emphasis?
Yeah, I think that's a rule that in many respects similar to a landing area. You know, you see players, you see gamesmanship really, and just understanding the balance. The issue we had was we didn't hit, you know, people's arms. We just contested kind of horizontally, where we were fouling shooters, and you know, we need to contest vertically. That doesn't mean that you can't contest aggressively. It's just the same way as a landing area. So I think for us, it where we've made our mistakes hasn't really been that rule. You know, we've made bonehead plays. So,
I need better seats.
right? You can see a few of them.
Thanks, Coach.
Okay.
Thank you. I like your shirt.